I think even though we've already done an interview, I think I'm most excited for I'm most excited for everyone, let's face it. But I think this whole series of women's health is just going to be like so exciting for women in general, but even just already today in discussions, there's been a lot of discussions around nutrition and hormones. So that I think is going to be the primary thing that we discuss. And so, okay. When it comes to women and their hormones, what would you say, what factor or like what percentage of factors in women's hormone regulation does nutrition play?
I think not necessarily nutrition and, am I eating apples and protein and things like that? But what we see over and over is blood sugar stability playing a huge role in hormones. If you are not eating breakfast, if you are not eating lunch, if you're living on coffee and a prayer and, you wake up and you have your coffee and that's it until maybe lunchtime, you might grab a bar in the car with the kids or something like that. Your hormones are not going to your entire body is not going to fare well. It will disrupt and affect everything that's going on in your body. It can affect your sleep. But what we're seeing a lot is when we get testing back, and Dr. Waldo goes over it with patients, is their hormones are off a little bit, and so is their insulin, or so is their glucose. So eating regularly, which of course is nutrition, right? But it doesn't matter as much what you eat as are you eating. Now, of course, we don't want you waking up and eating a candy bar for breakfast or things like that. Like a balanced meal, protein, fat, carb is really important, but so is eating regularly. And I think most moms, either moms or women, busy women in jobs, just across the board. I think women do more in their day than men oftentimes, and it's easier for them to ignore their body signals. I'm hungry. I can feel that I'm hungry, but I have to finish this paper. I have to finish calling these 5 clients. I have to go get the kids from school. They're begging me for a snack. They're pulling me this way and that. And we just choose not to, or forget, or don't even feel that we're hungry. And so we don't. And it just sets up the entire body to not be resourced well enough to function the way that it's meant to.
I don't ever plan to talk much on these things, but I think it's really interesting that in the healthcare system for women, there's a lot of ignore your symptoms. And I think it's very interesting that as women, we walk around all day and ignore our needs. And I wonder what connection there is with that in general. But so here's what I want to dig into. I want to dig into supplements, the need for supplements. I want to dig into a lot on hormones and perimenopause. It was probably the biggest questions that people had were related to hormones, related to perimenopause, were related to vitamin deficiencies. What things do we lose as we get older? And so how do you start when someone comes into your office from a nutrition perspective when they're struggling with hormones and perimenopause?
The first thing that I ask for is a food log. What are you eating during the day? What do those foods look like? What times are you eating? Are you eating full meals? Are you eating snacks? Just are you drinking alcohol? What does your week, your 5 to 7 day food journal look like? And then we kind of go from there. To see, are people eating proteins? Are they eating the same foods every day? For some people, that's fine. For other people, it's not. There's different factors, that go into that in terms of their overall health as to what foods may or may not be good for their body specifically. But the first thing that I'm asking is, what does your week look like for food?
And have you found any consistencies between here's the symptoms and the hormone imbalances that we're seeing with these labs, and here's the trend of what their diet looks like or what their lifestyle looks like in those foods?
Generally, when someone brings in a food log, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize blank. I didn't realize I wasn't eating enough. I didn't realize I was eating this much of this thing. I didn't realize I wasn't getting enough protein. I think that we tend to eat the same foods and have the same routine. And if there's something in that routine that isn't ideal, we don't recognize it. We're just doing the same thing, especially women who usually have more on their plate. and really, especially moms, you're trying to get your kids ready, you're trying to do that, and you're grabbing things or eating what they're eating or eating the leftovers off of their plate, and your meals aren't balanced. And if you talk to a lot of moms, that story is very consistent. And I think there's a lot of things that play into that in terms of, self-values and things like that. But we see it a lot just for a whole variety of reasons.
That's funny. I definitely used to do that before I realized that the things that my kids like to eat are not the things that are best for my health. But then it flip-flopped, and I was like, I need my kids to be eating what I'm eating for their health. So
we've also had, older patients that, their kids are grown that come in and bring in food logs, and they're like, I didn't realize I'm literally not eating enough calories, and they can't lose weight, and their hormones aren't so great, and their cortisol isn't so great. And them improving their calories, eating more, eating another serving of whatever it is they're eating. The foods that they're eating aren't necessarily bad, but they're just literally not getting enough. And your body will hold on to weight if it thinks it's starving, if it doesn't know when the next meal is, if it doesn't know that consistency. And that's what can fluctuate the hormones and add to the cortisol as well.
What have you found as far as like non-organic foods, processed packaged foods, things like that? How do those impact hormones?
I don't know that I don't see a huge difference. I know there is a huge difference between organic and non-organic, but what I see a bigger difference is the people that are eating whole foods versus the people that are eating processed and packaged foods, or even eating out a lot. The people that are eating less processed, less packaged have less issues. Some days, especially, once back to moms, sometimes getting the food in the body is just as important as what you're eating. So sometimes we encourage people to eat what they have. If you're feeding your kid a snack, eat that too, even if it's not the best thing ever, because your body can't run on nothing either. So there's sometimes some balance. Of course, we want people to be eating the best options that they can because they're going to be healthier for that. But the baseline sometimes is start with the best that you can do. And that isn't always all organic, non-processed, no eating out. We sometimes kind of have to meet people where they are and take baby steps.
Okay. But if we were to talk about packaged foods, say, there is something that I've heard you say before about specifically cereals, granola, shelf-stable grains, and mold. And I would love to hear more about that and the science behind that and how it impacts women.
Yep. So corn, wheat, oats, peanuts, coffee are all foods that are super, super susceptible to mold. And it's because when they're pulled out of the ground or harvested, wherever they're being stored is susceptible to mold. And so when those things are put into processed foods or they're packaged goods, they're cereals, they're the easy foods to grab. Peanut butter sandwich. Like, who didn't grow up with peanut butter sandwiches? And so I often encourage moms and families and women to ditch the peanut butter and switch to an almond butter or to something like Nutso, which is a combo of nuts without peanuts, to mitigate or reduce that risk of mold exposure from the food. And there's no difference or very minimal difference between organic and non-organic when it comes to the mold and the mycotoxins in food. They're both susceptible to it. It doesn't have to do with how they're grown. It has to do with how they're all stored. And the organic versus non-organic there's no difference between how they're doing that, which is really frustrating. And so our bodies are made to, detoxify themselves. So if you're having that as a treat or you're having it, once a week or not every day, your body should be able to deal with some of it. But if you're constantly eating packaged processed food, especially if it contains corn or wheat or oats or peanuts, the risk of ongoing mold exposure is very high, and it's very hard on your kidneys and your liver.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, the liver is the kind of the center for hormones.
Mm-hmm. It's the center for a lot of things. And so that mold can impact every single, system or function in the body when it starts to impact those organs.
I think I was going to segue into hormones and perimenopause based on diet. What do you have to say on that?
Well, I think what's super interesting is that perimenopause isn't really a word that it existed, of course, 10 years ago, but it was not thrown around for women in their mid 30s or even their late 30s. You know, that is something that is being diagnosed or suggested or thrown around in moms' Facebook groups or women's, you know, anywhere that women are congregating. I have perimenopause. My doctor's talking about this. My sister-in-law has perimenopause. Like, it's a whole thing that was not being discussed in this age group 10 years ago or, you know, further back than that. It's always existed. Like, I'm not, you know, saying it's not a thing or something like that. But the age range that it's now being mentioned in is 10 years sooner than it was for our moms or for our aunts. The toxins, the environment, the foods that we're eating, how nutrition has changed in the past 100 years. I think most women, most people, men, women, kids, aren't getting enough sun. Like, we're not outside. We're not moving our bodies. Most people aren't moving their bodies. You know, we go to work, we do our work, which is potentially, you know, sitting down. It might be a little bit more active than that, but most people are not moving their bodies the way that they're meant to. And that body movement helps your whole body function, you know, efficiently, normally, you know, whatever word you want to use. And it just disrupts all the systems when you're not getting the vitamin D that you need. You're not moving your body the way that you need. And I think that probably has something to do with it, as well as food is not made. You know, does not have the same nutrients that it had 100 years ago. Our soil is depleted. It's different. And we have access to so much more processed and just not whole foods.
So when it comes to supplementation and diet for packaged foods and foods that are just like not ideal from a nutrient perspective, what do you recommend for women that are in their 30s and 40s to be eating? Sorry, not to be eating from a supplement perspective.
Protein. Protein is huge. I think that a lot of people are not getting enough protein. Protein, fat, healthy fat, coconut oil, avocado oil, butter is okay for a lot of people. Most people that are sensitive to dairy can do okay with butter. So that's something you kind of have to experiment in your own body. But just healthy fats and protein, and then some carbs, whole food carbs, sweet potato, potatoes are okay for a lot of people, squash, go easy on the kale and the salads, but you know, they're okay to have a couple times a week. Cucumbers, all those types of things for carbs, and just really limiting the processed foods, like really focusing on whole foods. If you look at the label and you can't pronounce half the ingredients, you probably shouldn't be eating it.
Yeah. So if someone is not eating a super nutrient dense diet though, like from a vitamin perspective, what are those like more crucial vitamins that you usually end up recommending to them?
Typically, if people are not out in the sun, a lot of people are really low in vitamin D. So fish oil is really good for that. High quality fish oil like Rosita's brand is really good. It's minimally processed, minimally manufactured. So fish oil has some natural vitamin D. It also has vitamin A, which is really important for the liver as well. In the office, we have a powder that we often recommend to patients. It's a multi-powder, and it has collagen in it as well. So it's a little bit of extra protein along with all the vitamins. Vitamin D, multi. I think those are the big. A lot of people are at our office anyway are on that multi powder. It's a chocolate flavor, so it's really easy to drink. And then the vitamin D. I think a lot of women are being recommended hormone therapy, like bioidenticals or whatever that looks like from an MD, in the just the conventional medical world, when sometimes that's necessary. So sometimes that's unavoidable. It's absolutely the best thing for the patient. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's other things that they can do first. They can manage their stress to keep their cortisol under control. Sometimes that means going to bed at a normal time. And then there's the blood sugar piece is really my takeaway, that I want people to know, is that if your blood sugar is not balanced, it has the ability to mess up your whole system, hormone, just everything. But hormones are a really big player in that. And if you're not eating enough during the day and you're not eating throughout the day, it's going to be very difficult to get your hormones under control or managed or whatever it is you're trying to do if you're not taking that food piece and that stability into account.
Is the 3 meals a day and 2 snacks, is that what's best for women to be doing to best manage their blood sugar, would you say? Like big meals, small meals? Like what's the ideal?
I think that it's different for every person. I think that, if you're underweight or, borderline underweight, you're probably going to need to eat more often. And some people need smaller meals more often. Some people can handle the bigger meals with less snacks or maybe a snack. That is really specific to any given person's body. So there is no follow this and you'll be good. But if you're paying attention to your body and you're paying attention to your hunger cues, and some people just aren't hungry when they wake up, but that doesn't mean that their brain and their body doesn't need to eat. It just means that there's some kind of disruption somewhere. So eating something small right when you wake up, it doesn't need to be a whole meal, but getting that stability into your body is really important.
Okay. What are those cues that you would say for people like that are not super aware of their symptoms around hunger, or they're used to not putting themselves first? What are things that they can either notice about themselves or do proactively to make sure that they're like, oh, okay, it's time to eat?
I think that some people having a timer or an alarm going off on their phone or just being aware of the time and just eating regularly can help their body kind of wake those hunger cues back up. What we see a lot is teachers are teaching all day. They're up early. They have to get to the classroom early. Then their next break is at lunch. Now, if there's a kid that has an issue or someone needs help with the homework at lunchtime, or, teachers even struggle to go to the bathroom during the day. So they often lose their perception of hunger. They lose their perception of like when they actually need to go to the bathroom, because it's not an option for them to just stop what they're doing and grab a snack, or stop what they're doing and leave their classroom full of kids to run to the restroom. So for some people, it literally is just about setting a timer. I wake up, I grab a yogurt with some protein powder in it, or, whatever that looks like. So that's a smaller, that's not bacon and eggs with toast or something like that. And then they have snacks in their bag, and when they can grab one, they do it, or, whatever is reasonable for your schedule. And then like your stomach rumbling, like some people just ignore that. I know for sure that I ignore that regularly, because I'm like, oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. So it's reprioritizing things like, no, I have to eat. Like this phone call can wait 5 minutes because I have to have a snack, or I need to sit and eat lunch, even if it's quickly. It's kind of about priorities sometimes too.
For women struggling with nutrition that also seem to have symptoms of perimenopause, and they don't really know what to do, how would you recommend that they best approach diet as a way to assist with those symptoms?
Pulling out processed foods is a really big one. A lot of people don't do well with gluten and don't do well with dairy. That doesn't mean that you or anyone else may or may not do okay with those, but it's really easy to experiment with. You just pull them out one at a time. For 3 to 6 weeks is usually a good time for it to kind of clear your system mostly. And then you can try adding it back. If you add it back and you have symptoms or something changes, you probably shouldn't be eating that food. And you just know. Like it's a little bit different for everybody, but when you pull out the foods that you're sensitive to and try and add them back one at a time, so you know what's the problem and what's not, you just know. You just don't feel good, or you'll have some digestive issues or a headache, or we have some people that have had really big reactions once they've been completely out, and it was like, oh, that was a really big deal. And now that it's out, I feel better, and I just had it and I feel terrible. And I cannot believe that I lived like that for a really long time.